the late start of this GLA Oversight Committee with quorum. Can we begin with item 1, apologies for absence and chair's announcements. Have we got any apologies?
We have 2 apologies, Chair, one from Assembly Member Copley and one from Assembly Member Whittle.
Okay, and just for housekeeping issues, if we can make sure our phones are turned to silence. Let's then move to item 2, declarations of interest. The officer's advice is there before you. Can we note the list of officers held by Assembly members? Can I also ask members if there are any disclosable pecuniary interest on specific items listed on this agenda?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item 3, summary list of actions. Can we note the outstanding actions arising from previous meetings of the GLA Oversight Committee?
Noted.
Item 4, 2020 Mayor of London, London Assembly elections preparation. Mary, welcome, and it's good to see you. For those of us around the table, in terms of your recent accidents, and welcome back in your first day. You're going to introduce this report.
Thank you. I'm presenting this report with my Greater London Returning Officer hat on. And I am joined by colleagues. So Alex Conway, you know, he's my Deputy Greater London Returning Officer. Lee Goddard is our Programme Director for the elections, and both of whom you have met at the previous briefing on this. But I've also taken the opportunity of bringing AJ Patel with me this morning as well. And AJ is fulfilling the role that the Assembly recommended we put in place after 2016, which is to have our own technical expert embedded with the e-counting provider to make sure we've got our own ears and eyes in there throughout the testing and development process. So I thought you would welcome seeing AJ himself here this morning. And then Tom, as ever, is supporting on financial issues. So we put together a sort of briefing paper for you. I mean, I think the summary headline is that I am pleased that we remain on programme and on budget for our preparation for 2020 elections. That doesn't mean to say that there aren't still some risks on the table and challenges ahead, but I've tried to lay out in this paper how we have delivered what we said we would do over the previous 6 months and what our priorities are in the next 6. The issue that was still hovering as we submitted this paper was the question about whether the government would seek to move the election from the 7th of May 2020 in light of the fact that the Friday is definitely going to be a bank holiday, and of course that is the day that we count. I'm very pleased that we've had confirmation from the Minister for the Constitution that the government is not seeking to change the day, and I have circulated that letter separately to members. So we will be going ahead on the 7th of May as planned. All the planning is linked to that. We will be counting on the 8th. We have the support of the constituency returning officers for that. We will still have additional challenges because of trying to do that on a bank holiday, but we don't think those are insurmountable. And the letter from the Minister has also confirmed that the government will pick up costs, additional costs that accrue from activity on that bank holiday. So we're busy putting in a scheme to check that we track every extra pound of expense going forward. The other question that we have had hovering is whether or not we might find ourselves coinciding with a general election, and we remain very clear that has to remain a risk for us going forward. So that is something else that we are very mindful of. But unless, Chair, there was anything else that you wanted me to cover as introduction, I think that's probably what I wanted to say.
A couple of things. In terms of the risk of the general election, I think that's quite fair, but if the government chooses to call a general election, will you really expect them to pick up any costs? Or are you envisaging that we run the general election on the same day? as the GLA elections? What's the contingency planning? What's the discussion that you've had with government or amongst yourselves about that?
So at the moment, the conversation, there isn't a live conversation with government today about a possible combination, I think it's fair to say. But there has been a lot of discussion previously about that. I think broadly what would happen is that polling day would be a combined polling day on the 7th of May. And then there would be a discussion about which count comes first. And
there
you know, the
discussion. There
It's going to be a very short discussion.
Let's be realistic. There wouldn't be a discussion.
No, it would be the parliamentary.
Parliamentary would take precedent. The question is, our colleagues in the boroughs who've got experience would say to us that it would be near enough impossible in terms of the integrity of the ballot or to ensure about different bits and pieces. It would just add to the complexity on the day. So we've got anyone who can recall the European ballot paper will think of what the list ballot paper looks like, and never mind the Assembly constituency members' ballot paper. I think the other ones, we're dealing with lots of paper. So what do our colleagues in the borough say then on that issue, or are you about to consult with them or not? Because we are reliant on them delivering a service on behalf of us, and we ought to take their views into account, and government ought to be aware of it.
Yes. Do you want to comment on that?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think.
So can I just raise the point that isn't the greater risk that the general election would be held on the 8th?
Unlikely on a Friday.
But if they're moving other elections to the 8th, isn't that...
No,
then
it's
No, they're not. They're keeping everything on
the
the 7th.
election's on the 7th.
But they're moving the counts?
No, we will count on the 8th, as we always do. We always
Right.
count on the Friday.
So they're not likely to call the election on a Friday?
No, it'll always be a Thursday.
Good, just checking.
It's bank holiday, they're moving to the Friday.
Back to the,
Sorry.
back to the question. Under the current legislation, the parliamentary count must commence within 4 hours of the close of that poll. So the outline idea would be that for the boroughs very much to carry on counting as they would normally for a parliamentary overnight on the Thursday, with us then kicking off our GLA counts as per normal on the Friday morning. That would mean a resource issue for the boroughs, because of course they'd be looking for fresh teams to come in. The other point to put is of course verification. We have to ensure there's no cross-matching of ballot papers in the wrong ballot boxes, so that's also got to take place as well. But the idea would be, at the moment, from the borough's suggestion, is that they would carry on as per normal, count overnight on the parliamentary on the Thursday night into the Friday morning, and we would commence our count as normal on the Friday morning.
But I think that's the bit that needs the discussion.
Yes.
I'm not sure whether us starting on the Friday morning would be realistic.
That's not terribly realistic, is it? Because general election counts very often take much longer than just the Thursday night. And the idea that you could just go seamlessly from one to the other, wouldn't it be better to just have a contingency plan for the GLA count to start on a Saturday? Because otherwise it's all over the place. You know, I don't think you're going to be able to do both.
Yeah, there's quite right. Sorry, there are a whole range of options that have been discussed with the boroughs at the moment. The majority are saying that they'd rather try and do it in that sequential way of carrying on as normal overnight Thursday night, and then getting fresh teams in to support us on the Friday GLA count.
But that does assume that all the counting is done overnight.
Yes, it does.
Which it
And
may very well
everyone's
not be.
finished.
I mean, Kensington, for example,
Late.
wasn't done until late Friday evening
Indeed.
by the time it declared.
I think it's fair to say that now we've got certainty that our election won't be moved, so we will be going ahead on the 7th and the 8th. Then that removes significant uncertainty we were dealing with around our own election. And I think now we're in a position to go back and have more detailed conversations with the boroughs about the what if.
But I think our election won't be moved because of the bank holiday. It's a different scenario. Our election could be moved depending on the timing of the general election. If it goes along, then someone needs to have a discussion in government to take a decision, which has been happened before, whether to combine the elections or to defer. And it would be us who would be deferred. And also, I think, for members of this committee want to know is, are those conversations being carried on with government about what those issues are? And if there is a deferment, then there's an issue from the political process in terms of maintaining a vote, that there is to be a reasonable period between the two elections, or our vote will even go down further. I think there's the complexity of all the paperwork and a recipe, a disaster waiting to happen, to be honest, around this in terms of that. Not saying that our colleagues are not competent, because they are very competent in this, but it's challenging. And yeah, we can rise up to challenges, but why do we make it harder on ourselves by not having these conversations? So I think that's what we're going to say. The second point I do want to make clear is that if there is extra cost occurred in terms of these issues, I don't expect the government calling an election piggy-banking off the bank of us and getting it on the cheap. If anything, it should be the other way round. So somehow you, great negotiations, hopefully better than government with EU, have got to do better on the finances for us in terms of government, because they're calling the shots here, and I recognise they will take precedence.
Chair, do you mind if I just briefly come in on that point? Chair, you probably recall when we did combine, not with a general election, you probably recall with the Euro election, it was moved to a June, if I recall correctly. 2004, thank you, Cara. I know it was quite a long time ago, but I mean, we actually benefited financially from that because there's two sets of costs and they are reduced accordingly. So I absolutely appreciate what you're saying about a general election being different, but potentially there's an upside to this as well.
Yeah, but there's a precedent that's been set, and I'd like us to explore it rather than drift into it. Assembly Member Sharp.
Do we have authority to change or determine the date for count? I mean, are we able to, on our own accord, able to change, say, from Friday to Saturday, like Gareth indicated, which I think, should there, were there to be two elections taking place at the same time, makes sense to hold it on Saturday, for example. Are we able to do that, or do we require any special permission, or what the legal position is?
I think that the decision about when we count, I think, is a local decision to us.
Yes, it is local.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Second question is, if we were to hold count on, the arrangement is on bank holiday week, on Friday, what is the extra cost? Because obviously there will be enhancement, and who pays for that?
I'm happy to come in on that, Chair. As Mary said, as per the letter circulated to the committee members, the government's already undertaken to meet any additional costs we incur from that Friday being a bank holiday in May next year. Now, in terms of what those additional costs might be, clearly the biggest one would be the borough staff and the additional payments they get for working on a bank holiday. But there could be some others. There could be some at the venues. If Excel, whoever it might be, has to pay their staff extra, there could be some additional costs arising there. There could be additional costs arising. Some people get cabs back from here late on the Friday night. There might be additional cab charges, etc. I mean, there's just a lot of different categories which we're going through now. Clearly, the biggest one is the borough disbursements for their staff, but there will no doubt be others too. But you've seen the letter. The letter gives that commitment. Sure. As Mary said earlier, it's very important which we keep the records to do that, which we shall do, of course, and make that claim. So that's a very positive sign that we're getting that money back. So they don't have to do that. So that's a very positive thing for us in terms of our budget remaining the same as it currently is. But clearly we can provide this committee with updates near the time as to exactly where we stand and all that, and what we're expecting the sort of quantum of that to be, which we don't know it right now.
Okay, any more about election times? Caroline Pidgeon.
Yes. So you're working through the estimated extra cost at the moment, so you'll be able to provide that to us?
Yes.
Great. I wanted just to take a step back, for I've got a couple specifically on this, in terms of the decision that was made to go ahead with electronic counting and so on. And I'm not saying whether that's a bad thing or not, but I know the Electoral Commission twice recommended doing a proper cost-benefit analysis of e-counting. I'm wondering, was that carried out? Is that report available?
So it's prior to my and Mary and Lee's arrival, but the work that was undertaken post 2016 sort of went to the sort of officers sort of working group that looks at these issues. and so we can share that with the.
We have dug out a paper
There was a
that
report.
predates us. Yes.
Okay, it'd be useful to see that, just particularly because, you know, the contract's gone from something like 4.1 million to 9 million. This is significant money to count an election. And I realise, of course, you know, democracy, there is a price, and that's quite right, but it is so big. It'd just be useful to see how you've how you've made that decision, particularly given the Electoral Commission had twice said to you, you need to look at this.
If I remember correctly, and colleagues will provide you with the full information because I was around at the time, one of the absolutely critical factors in Jeff, who was in Mary's shoes at that point, taking that decision was the feedback from the boroughs. The feedback from the boroughs was very, and Lee will correct me if I've got this wrong, but the feedback from the boroughs was very strong that they wanted e-counting for a variety of reasons around the efficiency and the timing of it. In terms of the cost of the contract, we can get back to you on that. But the e-counting contract last time was a roll forward of the one from 4 years previously, so we got a good deal on that. But we can get back to you on that.
Yeah, it'd just be helpful to understand that, just because just in the wider issue, because it had been raised, I want to really understand. You've looked at it and felt this is the best option for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I was reading in the report about Smartmatic, and I'm just wondering, it says in here they've done something in Scotland, but I couldn't find any evidence of that. Can you confirm whether they have delivered any other UK elections, and whether you then had any feedback on how they performed?
I didn't get the detail for you, yes. Part of their specification was around about their experiences helping out in Scotland, so I can bring that detail back to you.
Do you think they did work in Scotland?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Well, if you could, because I couldn't find any evidence of it.
Yeah.
I think it's that CGI was was the main contractor. Now, in the paper, we spelt out the various subcontractors who CGI are working with, as was also the case, I understand, in Scotland. Yeah. So I think that may be all there is to it.
So what does Smartmatic bring to the table here? What is their added value?
They bring the e-count solution. The hardware, the software is all to do with Smartmatic. They are the drivers of the e-count.
So they're the technical...
They're the technical aspect, absolutely.
Okay, so that's what they're bringing to the table. And then one other thing, in the report 4.6, you talk about proposed random manual sampling. I know that was something that had been raised before, that people wanted sort of greater transparency, more opportunity to examine ballot papers. Have you thought through more how that will work, and are you able to give me any more information on that, please?
Yeah, we're looking at a range of options on manual sampling. The most straightforward option will be, for example, to take a ballot box or a tray of papers that have been scanned, to separate out, to physically count the number of papers in that box per contest, to see that marries up then with the number that was scanned in. Further on in the process, once the verification is complete, we can also do further sampling if required, just to go through a box of ballot papers to say that paper 53, there were votes for X, A, B, C, and this is what's been transposed onto the system.
Are you able to do that with representatives from the parties on the day, just to assure them?
Very much so. That what we're going to be looking to do is consistency for each of the constituencies, to say that at 2 o'clock, for example, in the afternoon, there will be a manual process going on for any candidates and agents to have a look at throughout the day.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Okay, so I've seen Assembly Member Bacon and Assembly Member Shaw.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just following up on the point of cost, 9 million versus 4.1 million is a significant uplift. We've had e-counting at every single election that there has been for the Mayor and the Assembly. What actual, Caroline asked the question about what added value is it going to be. Why is it going to be significantly different this time?
And quicker.
Yeah, because I've been a candidate in 5 of the 6 elections, and I was closely involved in the first election, and in every single case there's been a disastrous count that's been delayed for hours and hours and hours for reasons that were, I would have thought, eminently avoidable. So what is going to be improved this time for the extra millions that are going to be spent on it?
Alex will come in a second. I'll just to repeat that quite narrow point I was making, just so we're all absolutely clear that the 2016 costs that is the right year, isn't it? That's the last one, yes. Should be seen in the light of the fact that they were from 2012, and we triggered our rights in terms of having the contract a second time around. Now, obviously, as Alex is about to get into some of the detail here, the arrangement with Smartmatic followed a competitive procurement process. So it wasn't just we sort of went out and sort of had a chat with someone. It was an open competitive
No, I understand how
procurement
procurement works. I'm just asking what value add there is, because it's more than twice the cost.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, the previous process was clearly not very good because it took far longer than it should.
Well, I think
the mayoral election particularly.
I think every time, as you say, Gareth, every time there's been a delay so far, but clearly we're trying to avoid that.
I have to say, in 2016, I thought it was all going swimmingly. I got my result in about 2:30, and I was thinking, great, this is going to be done in no time.
Yeah.
And then we were still sitting at City Hall at midnight. It was ridiculous.
I remember, yeah. Sorry.
Well, it was so.
This was even later.
Yeah.
The increased costs come pretty directly actually from our attempts to avoid precisely the problems that have arisen in 2016 and other elections in the past. So if you were to look at, one of the first things that I was doing when I came into this role was to look at what we procured before and what we wanted to procure this time, and to see if there were things that we could build into the contract to minimise the risk of similar delays. So some stuff, we last procured 8 years ago, so there were some things around cyber security requirements, for example, which is just sort of carbon leaps and bounds where there are greater expectations. That's one area. Probably I'd say the biggest area, though, is around much greater scope or volume of the product testing, because as people will recall, the issue of 2016 was essentially an IT glitch, something which, if it had been picked up in, again, as it turned out, there wasn't a fundamental problem. There was just, a number that was coming out wrong when you pressed a button. It was fixed. But greater testing earlier could and should have picked the problems up. That's what we're doing now. Indeed, we've just gone through a big process with the contractors we've just agreed a minimum viable product with them as of last week. So, and that testing is going to continue and be built up through the autumn until we get to the point of the big sort of dress rehearsal that we plan to have later in the year. So that's one whole area. Another whole area, which again comes back to 2016 Assembly recommendations, is around a greater emphasis on transparency. So we've asked for much more this time around, again, I wasn't around last time, but the thing was that, you couldn't see or feel what was going on, as the count was happening in the way you can with the manual count when you see the piles of papers arising. So this time round, thinking of having some large screens, relaying real-time count information at the centres, and at City Hall as well. That's another part.
Just to interrupt your flow there slightly, there were screens at the camp, and people can log on online as well,
yes,
and check the progress of the camp. Yeah. So what's being added that wasn't already there?
As I understand it, more, bigger, faster screens. I gather there was an issue with the website sort of not loading up at some point under the last count. So again, we're looking to make that more live. Maybe the final issue worth, again, this is probably more one for the sort of boroughs, but the last time round, if any of you were at the council, there were a lot of different types of scanners being used. Some scanners turned out to be more reliable than others. Some were bigger, some were slower. What we're promised this time round are the latest state-of-the-art scanners, and that they will be the same for everybody. I mean, we've seen they're actually quite small, like one you might have at home. And that should be a faster, more consistent and reliable service. It will also cost a bit more. So, I mean, those are some of the reasons why things have cost more. But ultimately, as Tom was saying, we went through a procurement. We had an overall price in mind, and if the price had gone beyond what we'd budgeted for, we would have had to look at alternatives, including a manual count. The price that we came up with was within our budget, and we'll be holding the contractors to that.
I suspect the previous procurement process was about 10 years ago when you think about it, because it was for 2012, done one in advance of 2012. So that in itself, Gareth, as you're quite rightly saying, doesn't account for that leap in itself, but it was quite some time ago we procured, and that combined with what the market came back to us with, given the risk they face with all this, and as you said, the history of it, this is what we've got.
Okay. So as a final point, which is of course in the contracts, things that if everything goes very well, then we have the option to extend to 2024, and you would expect that to be at a much reduced price using the existing kit. Now, obviously, that's with the caveat if all goes well, but again, it's comparing like with like. So 2012 and 2016 was one set of contractors. We hope 2020 and 24 will be another.
Exactly.
Okay, forgive me for gentle scepticism on this side of the table, but I hope you're right.
I hope we're right as well.
But let's be very clear about a manual count. It would probably take us
much longer.
A month.
Oh yeah,
That's why the borough said what they said, Chair.
3 days.
Is a month.
that's why I
at the
wanted
earliest?
to understand
Well,
because
we can-
people query that all the time.
Exactly, and we'll share the visual. So in a nutshell, it talks about costs. The costs could be seen as similar. I mean, if you think about the European elections, which is a sort of similar thing, but where you're basically counting one vote, what you're doing here is counting 4 sets of votes. So some of the work that I can see here, which again we'll show, talks about having counts on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Another bit of the jigsaw that's worth, which I think is relevant to maybe to some of the Electoral Commission and other people's thinking at the time, is in fact this government did commit, rightly or wrongly, to introducing first past the post system for mayoral elections. Now, it seems rather unlikely that's going to happen, but had they done that, that might have increased the arguments for the manual count because it would decrease the complexity of the...
That's got to be true, hasn't it? Because the assembly count is just the same as a parliamentary count. The constituencies is. The list is straightforward as well. It's only the second preference thing on the mayoral thing that causes the confusion which leads to electronic counting, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
And the second preference has never decided the outcome of a mayoral election. So
It could do next time.
well, in theory it could, yeah, of course it could. But that's what will cause any delay in a manual count, isn't it?
That's good.
Assembly Member Shah?
Yeah, as I understand, and from my 2 experiences, personally, the enormous delays we've had were down to failure of scanners and software. Yeah. Now you talk about in 4.16 paragraph that during summer period would be testing scanners and software. I think it would be interesting to see what difference it makes this time around. I hope that you get it right. One further comment I've got to make is that you talked about screens which show you bars as to how borough by borough count is going. Though what it doesn't tell you from memory, correct me if I'm wrong, what progress in terms of percentage of count that's actually happened, and if possible, would also like to see the time, anticipated time that it will require to complete the count. I think that would be extremely useful because, again, I remember like all of us, hundreds of us hanging around the screen, just guessing, looking at the bars, not meaning much because, you could have about this much sort of space left for completion, got no clue whether it represents 60, 70, 80% and how long it will take. It's just, absolutely crazy, to be honest.
Ask AJ to answer that because we've done some work on that.
With regards to progress, the screens will show how far in terms of the count it has, the progress, the results are. We have experimented at trying to work out how much time is remaining, but because of the way the count proceeds in different phases, it's not really possible for us to create an accurate number that will give anyone real confidence in the figure there. So it's better not to have something there than have something that's going to be wrong.
So you don't reckon you'll be able to display the time for completion of the count, but would you be able to display what proportion of count has been completed?
Exactly.
Yes, that's what we are going to do this time.
Okay.
But I think, like last time, all the screens will also be frozen at 90%.
Yeah. I'd simply emphasize the need for getting the software and scanners right, because I know that the delays, at least 2 or 3 counts that I have attended, have been told due to the failures of those equipment.
Just to make that point, the delay last time was due to a glitch in the software. It wasn't the scanners. It is true that different scanners have led to different speeds and things.
Yeah. Okay, Assembly Member Berry, followed by Assembly Member Arnold.
Okay, I'm going to jump back and forth a little bit to some of the previous points that were made, if that's okay. So in terms of the cost-benefit analysis that was done and the increase in costs, Is the current cost very much higher than what was estimated during the cost-benefit analysis process? Can you remember? Obviously, like you say, we wanted to spend more money to make it work better, but what did we estimate the costs at? Was it 9 million?
Well, it was the problem with this conversation is it was all being done against very shortly after 2016, based on the 2016 costs.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but is it a lot higher?
Well, but as we know, the 2020 costs are significantly higher than the 2016 costs, but what we haven't done is rerun all the cost modelling for manual count. The decision about whether to go manual or electronic in 2020 was made back in
Yeah, no, I'm not questioning that
2017.
decision. I'm just wondering what the cost was when you did a cost-benefit analysis and whether it's much higher now. So whether the increase is entirely due to just the inflation or decisions that have led to, or what we anticipated.
I would say it was a combo of inflation and the extra things which we put in the procurement as a result of, partly as a result of the committee's recommendation.
And has the cost gone up since you did the estimate that you put into the cost-benefit analysis?
Yes.
Do you know what
because we did it in 2016.
Yeah. Before we ran the actual.
So
I'm just asking what your estimate was.
I mean, cost-benefit analysis is quite a grand term, but I mean, in terms of narrow budgeting, I'll give you a direct answer. So going back to the aftermath of 2016, we knew for a fact it would be substantially higher than.
Yeah, so you estimated it would be higher.
It's substantially higher from 2016 because of the with the arrangements we said it was triggered from 2012 and all the rest of it. We didn't know exactly how much higher it would be because we needed to go out to the market and find out. In terms of what we budgeted for, we had a very broad envelope, and as you know, the way we finance this is over 4 years, put £5 million in a year. So I think we had to sort of find out what the market said. I think if in trying to recall the exact budget, this is probably, yes, I think you're right. I think this is probably slightly higher than we expected in terms of the exact budget, but we made sure we set aside enough as we have to.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm not trying to do anything tricksy.
No. I've given you a straight answer.
It's all right. I've dug it out because we have it. It's nearly 6.8 million was the figure used in June 2017. But as Tom is saying, that's before we've done the market testing and it's before we've actually set out the detailed procurement that sets out what we want.
Now the cost is 9 million.
Yeah.
So, because the reason I'm asking that is because I want to go on to ask about the procurement process and the fact that in that procurement process you only ended up with 2 suppliers to choose from, which presumably was a disappointment. And so did you think about restarting that process or trying to sort of do more? There were people who expressed an interest who didn't come back.
Only one, so mine is that wasn't unexpected because part of the market testing somebody did was that there aren't that many organisations out there providing electronic vote counting. And the organisations that do exist, and this is exactly what happened, tend to form themselves into consortia for the purposes of bidding. So actually our worry, or certainly my worry when I started, was whether we were going to get anything at all, whether either we were just going to get, one mega bid at a not very good price, or indeed nothing, or indeed because we changed the spec a fair bit that we'd find that nobody responded. So I was more worried about a lack of response. We ended up with 3 expressions of interest, 1 dropped out, and we had 2 very well developed sort of consortium bids from the main players in this field. There isn't a big choice.
So I mean, the reason I'm asking that is, with a limited field, like you say, what are we getting value for money here? Because, like you say, the cost is higher than we expected.
It limits our choices. You're absolutely right. What you're saying, it limits our choices.
So potentially we're overpaying a bit for this, but we can look at that after the election.
Well, I don't think we're overpaying. We simply have to live according to market conditions. I mean, I just reiterate 2 points, just to reassure you. One is that we budget over 4 years for this, so it's not as if we get an extra 2 million and we think, oh my goodness, where's that going to go? So it's done very prudently. The second point, just to emphasise in terms of, yes, they are substantial costs for the e-count, but I think I probably understated it before. The feedback we, and colleagues to my right weren't here at the time, the feedback we got from the boroughs in terms of manual count was incredibly strong. They didn't want to do that.
I'm not arguing for that.
No, I know you're not. But I'm just saying, in the context of where we're at, the manual account's essentially not an option because the boroughs don't want that. It's not practicable. We go to the market. It's a very limited market, as Alex has explained, and you know we strive to get value for money, but it is limited.
Are we able to get a breakdown of the tendering scoring process that was used between these suppliers? I know that you warned them in your contract process that there would be, this might be FOIable, for example. So if we ask, are we able to see that?
Only within the limits of what was commercially confidential. Which
yeah, we'd like as much transparency as possible, if that's okay. The other thing is that it's clear from the document that you've given us that quite a lot of 4.14, it says, quite a lot of the work that is going to be done is subcontracted. And so we want to make sure that there's good accountability if anything goes wrong. All the subcontractors are people who would come in and talk to us if there were problems after the election. In the same way as we got the people literally responsible for those spreadsheets to come in and talk to us previously.
You're asking whether they would?
Yes,
we would ask
we
them
haven't
to,
got anything that's within the contracts and say, oh no, that's subcontracting, it's a different contract or anything like that.
And we've met with them all, we've met with them together, but we've seen all the people involved, all the different key contractors. Lee and Alex and AJ are working directly with some of those suppliers.
Yes.
It might be worth saying they're required by the Act to come in if you ask them to.
I don't think that would be a problem at all.
The principles of transparency and accountability that are built into the main contract extend down into those subcontractors.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay. Thank you. In the Scottish local elections, so going into preparation now in your work plan, the Scottish local elections that were previously done by the same companies in some other form, which is why it's difficult to find, did a lot of preparation, including using by-elections as tests for it. They did a very large-scale mock count in the September before the election. Now, in your programme plan here, I struggle to find such an extensive process of trialling it. There's a bulk test mentioned in section 4.16 of the report. There's a testing activities line that runs from May this year to next year, but there's no detail. Can we get more detail of your testing processes, the bulk tests, the dry runs?
Full dress rehearsal.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, Alex, sorry.
Yeah, so the high-level programme plan is just that. So there's a lot of detail going behind the scenes. AJ is working very closely with Smartmatic CGI on all of this. We're going through the most extensive testing programme that's ever been undertaken for electronic counting. We've already, for example, had the boroughs in to do run through 50,000 ballot papers to have a look about how that works. That programme's continuing. We're going to do a bulk test of 700,000 ballot papers, which is the largest test we've ever undertaken. And coming out of that, then we head towards a full-scale dress rehearsal later in the year, whereby we will run the complete process for a constituency. Shadowing that with what I think the technical term is robots, replicating the counts for the other 13 constituencies underneath that to make sure that the system can cope with a full-scale count. But we are doing the most significant detailed testing that's ever been undertaken, and we can provide more detail on that certainly.
Very much like to see that detail. On a similar note, you mentioned, we talked about improvements to the processes for showing us, the candidates and our agents, what's going on. You talked about new scanning machines. There's no detail in the report about how you're going to be training up our representatives to see what's going on. I know you've offered us a visit to see the equipment, and I think we want to take that up, if that's okay, as a committee, to see what's going on. But obviously, it's our representatives who want to be able to know what the scanning machine is going to be able to look like, what information is going to be available to them on the day, and I'd love to see just details of how you're going to be engaging with the parties, not just the boroughs, so that everyone is prepared for what we will know on the day. And we can.
Again, that will form a key plank of the plan. The testing site Haringey will be sitting up there ready for people to come and view on selected days, of course, with plenty of warning. But it will be open and transparent as we possibly can, and for the candidates and agents, prospective candidates and agents, one of the key ideas will be to come along, to have a look, prior to obviously a long time ahead of May, to have a look at the system in action in the test environment, so you can better understand what's going on.
If I can just add to that, I think we're working now with the consortium to lay out that programme, because I'm very keen that those dates need to be in people's diaries well ahead. But as we've heard, there's been an awful lot of bulk testing going on, and I think the consortium quite rightly wants to be clear that the testing schedule is going to plan before they commit to too many other dates. But as we've just heard from Alex, we've got past the sort of so-called minimum viable product stage, which is a really important piece of the schedule. And now we're saying, actually, we need to get this dress rehearsal date in. We need to get dates in where the Haringey Centre will be open for visits, and then we need to think about, when the committee comes, and exactly as you say, when representatives of candidates come as well.
What sort of timing is it that we might be able to visit?
Autumn.
Yes.
This year.
So, this year.
Great.
This year. We think the full-scale dress rehearsal will be sort of late November, early December. Certainly will be before Christmas.
Should we give you a pause?
I have one final question.
One final question, fine.
I'm
I was
really
going
sorry.
to bring someone else in.
My next topic is the marketing question that we've asked you before. There's nothing in the report about that, but I wanted to ask for an update on. It's in the plan that you're working on marketing and information to give more clarity about how people vote. Previously, we've asked you about that. It's one of our recommendations. I've tried to clarify with you last time we spoke that this will include separate information about the Assembly election and not just trying to address the confusion there clearly was about the Mayor election, because there's confusion in both with the complexity. So can you tell us what's going to happen and when we can see the marketing materials?
Yes, so these things have to happen in stages, don't they? So that's what we're going to be focusing on now. I guess the most focus at the moment is going into the development of the London Elects website, which is clearly a very, very important window on the process and source of information. And we are taking great care to make sure that we are explicit about all the elections that are happening and the information relating to those elections.
Appointment to the head of media.
And then part of that then translates as well, and Lee is doing this, is working very much, we're working up the training programme for polling station staff, because exactly, what is said as those ballot papers are handed over and the advice that is given, it's really important that is consistent across London. Really important it's accurate and consistent, and I think we're probably putting more effort into making sure that that is clearer in the training programme, but we're developing that at the moment. We don't have that yet to show. And then we are putting the marketing team in place. We've made 1 or 2 appointments already. We are recruiting a head of media for the elections itself, and that is happening as we speak. And we are now starting work on some of the visual marketing material and printed material as well, which I don't have to show yet, but we're working on clarity of information and of course objectivity.
Can we see that when it's in draft?
I'm happy to share it as we develop it.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Assembly Member Arnold, then followed by Onka Sahota.
Chair, welcome this discussion, because I don't think any of us would wish to see Mary put in the position that our beloved Jeff was put in at 2016. And I'll just pick up a couple of points as somebody who was central to that. And the key thing, it seems to me, that worried everybody was the damage that was being done by the minute to voter confidence. Never mind the candidates, but, to voter confidence. And also the lack of management of the press. I don't know if you've picked this up. So, for instance, at Yali Pally count, even though we'd got over the early morning fact that beloved member of staff had pulled out the machine, and because that's what happened, and so the machine wasn't ready. We got over that hurdle. But our count was finished. Everybody knew we were sealed, and the press were there, and then they wanted to know, well, everybody else must be on the same timeline, everybody else must be finished, so are we all going to head to City Hall? And then the number of complicated messages that then the press received, and then it was going to be the next hour, the next 2 hours, the next 3, 4, 5, 6. So as important as marketing is, of course it is, it seems to me there's a central piece about who is going to be managing the overall comms, and that will be expensive. So who will be managing it, and is that factored into this package?
So the costs related to sort of increased comms team and that additional coordination that you're talking about is built into our package and our costs.
Right.
And the head of media appointment that we just talked about, which we are in the train of making at the moment, is going to be very important to that. We're also making sure that, like last time, we have very good people as count centre directors, one in Olympia, one in Excel, and one at Alexandra Palace. But probably, unlike last time, we're going to have a sort of stronger presence here in City Hall.
Right, that sounds it sounds encouraging.
Well, the four of us here, sitting here, will be core to that City Hall team all the way through Friday, well, and Thursday as well, but primarily Friday we're talking about. And we've still got some more work to do on what are our respective roles and responsibilities on that day. I think we have taken very seriously the lessons from last time.
And given, I know from my own boroughs that I represent, there's been massive changes.
Yes.
Just trying to guess about. I think I'll have 2 new chief execs. One didn't do the 2016. No. So it just in 3 big boroughs with, I think, nearing 900,000 capacity. We'll have new heads, and their structures have changed. Given your dependency on that relationship, don't you need some sort of backup situation to ensure that the staffing that you require can be funded? Because I'm not sure that there is the capacity within local councils to deliver as they used to. So how, and for some councils it's not good enough for the government to say we'll pay you back after. There'd be more than an inclination to underspend, surely. If you don't have it, you're going to not really go into big debt, hoping to get it back later.
Yeah.
So it's that sort of, I think, problem that is very complicated that you've got to address in order to ensure that this big beast of a thing is run smoothly. So how are you going to manage
I'll make
that?
a couple of points on that and then ask Lee and then Tom to come in on the money.
Yeah.
So you are absolutely right. There's been huge change in chief executives across the boroughs, and most of them are the returning officers. Not in every case, but in most cases. And Lee and I constantly keeping an eye on who's in which post. Quite a lot of this, I think, is about relationships and a lot of goodwill and a realisation that yes, of course, we depend on our colleagues in the boroughs, but they also wish to make a good job of this. So, a couple of things. I am continuing to stay a core member of the London Council's Chief Executives Group. So Jeff, my predecessor, was a member of that group.
Yes.
But I am
taking particular care to remain a very active member of that group, and therefore connected in both to the chief executives I already know, but to those new ones who come on. So I think that's an important part of this. We are staying very close to our constituency returning officers and borough returning officers. So we had them all in, I think it was this room, in late January for a meeting. They're all back here on the 24th of September for another briefing. We're getting very good attendance at those meetings and very, very good engagement. And also, you may not be aware of this, but there's a network of more experienced returning officer chief executives who have sat around something called the London Elections Management Board for several years now. And I used to be a member of that board when I was at Hounslow. And that board seeks to ensure that when there are elections in London, whether our elections or parliamentary or European, that broadly the London returning officer community is equipped to deliver them. You know, for London's reputation, to protect the reputation of London. So there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to buddy up with less experienced returning officers, to put in extra resource where it's needed. And we saw that work very effectively for the European election, where the lady at Lewisham had never run an election before, found herself the regional returning officer, and was given some considerable support by her peers. So we continue to tap into that. Lee works very, very closely with the elections teams. And of course there's change there, but probably there's been more stability in election teams recently than there has been in the returning officers. And they are a really, really important part of this, the head of elections. And I'll ask Lee to talk about that in a moment. On the money actually comes from us. So we have already been out to the boroughs. We've asked them how much this is going to cost to run, and we have had all their returns from them, and we have guaranteed to them that we will pay 90% of the costs on the 1st of April, so in advance of this election. Now, they will now revise those costs in light of that bank holiday, and we'll go back out. But we've had that conversation already. Yeah. But they know that we will reimburse them.
They'll get 9% of the increased amount, as Mary says.
They'll get 9%.
So there's in cash flow terms, and it's a good point to raise, but in cash flow terms, they're absolutely fine. Yeah. But they wouldn't be otherwise unless we did what Mary described.
Because I've sat on the borough side of this, and I know what it's like when you don't know about the money.
Yes.
So
that's an important change. That's an important change.
And at the moment, no one is saying they can't provide the resource. We're asking them to provide.
They've got the money. They can provide the resources when they don't have the money.
Yes, but we've made that guarantee 2 or 3 months ago. Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a bit about the wording?
Sorry, just to clarify, they got 9% up front last time as well, but just...
Yeah. We confirmed it a lot earlier this time, though, I think, which I think has been helpful.
Not a lot to add to what Mary's already said, but basically the level below the CROs, BROs, we are doing an awful lot of work with the electoral services managers. We've already had a couple of workshops with them, so forth and so on. Again, there's all the advisory groups we've set up. There's the Association of Electoral Administrators that look after nationally, but also the London group that I go to and meet with. And again, so again, we're doing a lot more extensive work with the boroughs this time around than we have previously, just to build that relationship and to better understand any concerns they have going forward. I have to say, at the moment, they're all very confident that they can deliver this election, taking into account the financial side. But there is a very strong seam of electoral administrators across London, carry a lot of experience. Many of them have been involved in GLA elections before, so I think there's a very strong, core there that will help us get through the organisation. But we are doing everything we can to make sure they know that they're supported from the centre.
That's important. And just one last point, Chair, about London Elect's website. I think it's a really good website. Certainly, I've used it over the years, and it's got better each time. Now that we're into websites using visual imagery and cartoon imagery, I would just ask you to keep an eye and to make sure any imagery is representative of London. because some imageries fall in foul of that, even when they're using cartoons, in style or the character or what have you. That will need checking because you want full engagement, and imagery can sometimes just upset a proportion of the population if you get it wrong.
It's a key
Yeah.
consideration.
Maybe we'll say, we're expecting the first, as Mary alluded to, since developers are redoing the website, maybe worth emphasising that the task we've given them is very much to say, you know, the London Elects website fulfils important statutory purposes, and that must be its primary purpose. Now, actually, there's a fair bit of work we can actually do compared to what we have at the moment. One, to sort of simplify some of the information there, and two, to make the whole thing more accessible. Again, it's not really been done for 8 years or so. So, you know, if you were to look at it on a mobile phone, for example, you might find it looks a bit wonky. So they're sorting out some of the basics around accessibility there, which is important. But we'll be keeping a very close eye. I think we know the lessons from last time that when it comes to using graphics that explain the role of the GLA, we just have to be the website must be absolutely watertight in terms of its neutrality. So we're very mindful of that.
And it is important, Chair, because there has been a case where an all-white image was projected to a mixed, complex, diverse community, and they had to withdraw it pretty quickly because nobody had done that check. So it's worthwhile bearing that in mind. That's as important as anything else. Yeah.
Remember Sahota?
Yes. I've been listening for 1 hour to this discussion, which just highlights how important this topic is. The costs have gone up by almost 100% on the promises that they'll perform something. In this contract you set up, is there any clawback that if they don't perform, we get some money back, right? Because I wouldn't let out a 9 million contract on my house extension, for example. I did a house extension and I put a clawback on it. Why have you put a clawback on it?
Well, Tom's reminded me that there was a clawback last time.
There was?
Yeah. So, this procurement, to be clear, this is all run through the usual lines with advice from, the sort of Transport for London colleagues who, of course, have a lot of experience in these matters. So,
in electoral county.
But in a nutshell, so the headlines of the contract are that there are milestones. So just gave the example of the minimum viable product. We've signed that off. In the event that they don't deliver a viable product on the day, yes, there will, as was the case last time round, there'll be. But in a way, the money is sort of not the point. The point is to run a successful election, and believe me,
nothing sharpens attention more than money.
Yeah, but last time we'd rather have had as members have already said, we'd rather have had a very prompt announcement last time rather than getting a clawback. So, as Alex quite rightly says, the money's secondary to a good service.
Hang on. This contract was given out because they didn't say to you, the new contractor didn't say, look, we know this is an important job, don't worry, we'll get a 4.2 million. No, there's money attached to it, right? I want to know, is there a clawback, and what is the clawback on it? That's the simple question. Is there a clawback? And what is the magnitude of the clawback?
That I'm just going to be cautious there about what may or may not be commercially confidential.
But the answer is yes, there is, and yes, there was, and it was invoked last time, and it will be invoked next time if it needs to be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all the comments around the table are really, I don't need to tell you about how damage to our reputation is, and damage done last time. In terms of the announcement of the results, and it all reflects on us all. And I know you're working hard to do that, and I think we should take the comments on in light of that, rather than any criticisms around that. There are constant issues around the transparency of the exercise. I forward you, I think, correspondence that I've had with, I don't know whether it went to every Assembly member or not, but if we can you share the response back to that group? In
has to respond directly.
Yes, I think
yes.
so.
That's
rather
fine, we'll
than
do
me
that.
as the committee chair, but
Yes,
can
that
you
would be
share that
awesome.
again to committee members of this organisation? So, colleagues, can we then note the report, and we'll obviously receive further updates as you proceed along. Thank you very much.
That other report you're going to let us have.
Of course, subject to. Okay, we move on to item 5. Is the establishment of GLA Sports Team. I'm relying on members reading this report. Do you wish to put questions to Alice Wilcott, Assistant Director, Team London Volunteering and Sports, or are you content to note the report?
I'm happy with the report.
Yeah, noted.
People are happy with the report. Thank you very much. We've got no further comments.
Sat there for an hour.
Thanks for your time, Alice.
Item 6.
Chair, I think we should congratulate Alice on the wonderful work that she does.
Okay.
Quality
Agree on
report.
that. Item 6, new ways of working, smart working. The same. I'm going to indicate members have read the report. Do you require an introduction, or can we note the direction of travel set out in the report?
Just a very quick question.
Oh, sorry, very quick.
Mary, I understand there was already some feedback about this at some of the all-staff meetings that were held, and some concerns about staff with sort of specialist type jobs like programming and design needing workstations that are not, you know, I mean, I do my best to work off this, sometimes I need a big screen, but I'm not a designer and I'm not a programmer and I don't need 2 screens and all of that. Are you taking into account that feedback, and will you keep us informed about what's going on?
Yes, we're going to have to cater still in the building for people who need specialist equipment and or large screens. And we'll have a proportion of desks that still carry that type of equipment. But the exact proportions, things like that, are still being worked through.
Right, okay, just to check.
And just further to that, in the avoidance of doubt, if staff have reasonable adjustments and have a disability, that would also be factored into in terms of our planning, both in terms of the desktop equipment and other support that we need.
That's covered in the paper, but yeah.
Okay, can we note the direction of travel set out in the report? Thank you very much. Item 7, financial restructuring. Tom Middleton, Head of Finance and Governance, can introduce the report if we want. No one wants an introduction. Are there any questions? Okay, the committee is asked to respond. We've got nothing to respond to in the following proposals. Wish you well in your endeavours. Item 8, update on voter registration pilot project. Sarah Mully, do you want to come forward? Executive Director, Community Intelligence Officer, will introduce this report. We want an introduction. Some of us would have had some of this informally, but I'm conscious of others that see shakes of head. Don't need an introduction. Are there any questions that you wish to raise to the Director with the officers? Okay, can we note the report and the advice of the GLA legal team and the Electoral Commission about branding and social media strategy? We agree that? Thank you very much. Item 9, work programme at GLA Oversight Committee. Can I ask the committee to note the work programme for 2019/20 Assembly year?
Noted.
Okay, date of next meeting. The next meeting is scheduled to be held on Tuesday the 3rd of September 2019 at 3:30 in Committee Room 5 of City Hall. Is that okay?
Agreed.
Noted. Right, item 11, any other business? I've agreed to accept 3 items of urgent business that all received following the publication of the agenda that need to be considered at the earliest possible opportunity. Those reports have been circulated and published under the cover of the supplementary agenda of this meeting. Item 11A, GLA Pay Award. Do you require an introduction? I understand group leaders and chair of the Assembly had received an informal report, not the chair, but the group leaders have. Do you require this report to be introduced to you?
No.
Okay, can we note the considerations set out in the report?
Agreed.
We agree that, thank you very much. Item 11B, Chief Officer's Review of Registration of Interest and Gift and Hospitality from Staff. Those that were at the last meeting will recall that this is the first paper, but the scoping of a potential possible review. Members have had an opportunity to read it. Assembly Member Pigeon.
Yeah, I mean, it talks about registration of interest. It doesn't sum up. So in 2.1, our recommendation, I think it should be registration and declaration of interest, because there's 2 different things. You can register them, but if you don't declare it and exempt yourself from decisions, then, you know, it's pointless and the timeliness. So it's quite interesting, since I raised the fact that the Mayor hadn't put anything up for 6 months, suddenly his gifts and hospitalities have gone up online. But, you know, there's clearly a problem in the process. So I think declaration needs to be put in there as well. And also, this only applies to officers, but I would have thought if you're reviewing it, you might want to review members as well, to be honest, because it is separate members, but I think we're probably better at it, quite frankly. But I think it may probably, if there's any changes, it might be worth just including that as well. I don't see in here the issue of all these, though it's referenced in here, all these companies, committees and things that meet in this place, how we're reviewing those as well and getting a clear list of those. I don't know if that's part of this or sort of along the side.
Mary, do you want to respond to that? And then I'm going to bring in Assembly Member Arnold.
It's similar.
Similar?
In fact, it's the very same concerns that I have. I think it's timely that there was a comprehensive review, and I'm just mindful that I think one time way back there was a change when something happened in the offices, then it didn't happen with members, and I think it was the level at which members were being asked to declare lunches at a lower level than officers or something or the other, and then we had to amend that. So I just think that there's a case for making sure that both systems receive a review now, and then fit for purpose for the next administration or the next 6 years or so.
Assembly Member Berry?
I wanted to ask how we can feed in ideas and maybe some other paperwork. I don't want to raise issues here. The Part 5 of the report says this report is seeking members' views on the process of the review, but the substance, can we feed that back by writing directly to you? Will you be writing to us to ask?
Yes, of course. I mean, I'm happy to commit to come around and meet group leaders individually as part of undertaking this review. That would help.
It might be better if you write to each Assembly Member, because there's probably people around this table that might have some views.
Give us a deadline.
and if you say formally, we're doing this review, and this is the scope of it, and if you've got any comments or issues of concerns, please write direct.
I mean, personally, my comments are related to work I've done as a councillor, so any Assembly member might have similar experience.
I mean, we just need to bear in mind, as we were told at last one, our declarations of interest are much stronger and clearer, I think, than it is around chief officers, and we're right to do it alongside and just remind ourselves what they are. But of course, we want to get some clarity in terms of the chief officers of this authority and the GLA family, if need be, because I think they get some consistencies across this organisation and the GLA family.
Just, Chair, can I just make two very brief comments on two of Caroline's points? It's actually a stage beyond declaration, as Mark Roberts always used to say. You remember Mark? He always used to say it's declaring them and then acting on that declaration as well. Because it's one thing to declare it, it's another thing to actually absent yourself or take yourself off, recuse yourself, or whatever it happens to be. So there's actually taking action on the back of the declaration. That's what Mark quite rightly used to say. On the other point about companies, absolutely it's part of this, and I think one task we should do as part of this exercise is clarify with members and others the interchangeability of decision making between the companies and the GLA, because that is core to a lot of the issues being raised here, and it relates to land and property matters as well. So I think we can use this exercise to help clarify exactly what our arrangements are between the GLA and its wholly owned subsidiaries.
Okay. Any more comments?
Just say, Chair, so we had deliberately focused on officers in this because this was the issue, the starting point for it, and I think as people have said, that does seem to be the area where we do need to be rather clearer than we are now. So I'm very happy to extend it to members as well, but that's why we focused on officers here, and I think we just do need to think a little bit about the timing of it, because I think you're hoping that I'll come back in September. I don't think I can come back with the whole thing in September if we extend it to members as well. But we'll do our best. We'll see where we get to.
Give us a progress report in September with
And
some
then maybe
determination.
final
I think
piece
we
in
want
October.
to. I don't want to wait till the next administration. I think we want some
No,
clearer
no.
views
Wait.
for the officers to work on,
Yeah.
particularly about them. I think the members' one is clearer, but we just need to refresh and remind ourselves. I think there's good governance practice around that. But I think certainly we want to give some further clarity to the officers.
Yeah. And any concerns, we'll show
Yep.
the new date.
Good. Okay, so can we take on board those comments and agree on that? Then let's move forward on the last item, 11C, review of grievance procedures. Would you like an introduction to this report, or have you read the report? I think we're clear on the direction of travel. I think it should be welcomed in that sense, as long as we don't mess up other parts of the processes around that, and I think that's taken on board in the paper. So the committee is recommended to respond to the direction of travel concerning the proposed changes in the current grievance procedure to enable key components of a resolution type model to be incorporated into the revised procedure. Is that agreed? Is there a way forward? Direction of travel?
One quite... Sorry, Chairman. I appreciate we're right at the end of the meeting and people don't normally sit in all day. When this was brought to Bureau, one of the things that I sort of came away with was it seemed to be built into the approach that the assumption would automatically be that if a member of staff raises a grievance against their manager is automatically in the wrong. And I don't really want that to be the direction of travel if I've got that correct. Because actually managers do need to be able to manage. And if they have to do that with one hand tied behind their back, that's not good for the organisation.
I thought the paper clarified that issue, but Charmaine D'Souza, please respond.
So yeah, clearly the feedback was that we want to both not assume that managers are in the wrong, but also to raise managers' capability. So paragraph 3.10 sets out how we intend to support line managers in that. And clearly there will be a period of time when we try and resolve any issues via a mediated approach, but that will come to an end. That's not infinite, either for managers to set out very clearly their expectations, or if equally for staff who may feel that they want to make their complaint more formal. But the line manager is central in ensuring that the problem is both dealt with quickly and efficiently, and also to make sure that the process is followed.
I think, Chairman, it might be useful to bring this back again after a period of time of operation to review it and see how it's progressing.
Within a year or within 6 months?
Well, I mean, I'm tempted to say 6 months because obviously we can't project forward from a year from here because some of us may not be here in a year's time. But I think probably in 6 months it might be useful to just have a look and take some soundings and see if it's improving things or not.
Okay, so we're recommending just to review it and see how it's working. Yeah.
Clearly that we'll have our 2019 staff survey results early in 2020, and of course this did come from the fact that 54% of staff said they chose not to report complaints, and 24% said they weren't handled well, so we hope to see some improvements in both those statistics.
Okay, can we agree that as a way forward? And at that point I now declare this meeting closed. Thank you very much.